I was standing in my garage at 3 in the morning, listening to the steady hum of my backup generator, when I heard the sharp knock that would change everything. The temperature outside had dropped to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of cold that makes your nose hairs freeze instantly and turns your breath into ice crystals. The power had been out in our subdivision in Duluth, Minnesota, for almost 18 hours, and my generator was the only thing keeping my elderly neighbor's medication refrigerated and my own pipes from turning into ice sculptures. I opened the door to find Brenda Patterson standing there in a puffy pink coat that made her look like an overstuffed marshmallow. Her face pinched with that special kind of irritation that only HOA board presidents seem to master. She was clutching a clipboard to her chest like it was a shield, and even in the dim light from my flashlight, I could see the piece of paper she was waving at me. "Adam Everett, do you have any idea what time it is?" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the frigid air like a knife. I glanced at my watch, though I already knew the answer. 3:15 in the morning, Brenda. What can I do for you? You can turn off that monstrosity immediately, she said, jabbing a finger toward my garage where the generator sat. Section 7. Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that no resident shall operate motorized equipment between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. You're in direct violation, and I'm issuing you a fine of $500. I stared at her, wondering if the cold had frozen whatever common sense she might have once possessed. "Brenda, the power is out. It's negative 15 degrees. Without this generator, my pipes will freeze and burst. My neighbor Mrs. Chen has insulin that needs to stay cold. This isn't about convenience. This is about safety." Brenda's expression didn't change one bit. She thrust the paper at me, and I saw it was an official HOA violation notice with my name and address already filled in. "The rules are the rules, Adam. If we make exceptions for one person, everyone will want exceptions. You have 15 minutes to shut it down, or the fine increases to $1,000. Are you serious right now?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 3 years, and while Brenda had always been a stickler for the rules, this was beyond ridiculous. "Brenda, think about what you're saying. There are 48 houses in this subdivision. How many of them do you think have their heat running right now with no power?" "That's not my concern," she said primly. "My concern is enforcing the rules that every resident agreed to when they purchased their home here. Now, are you going to comply, or do I need to call the police for disturbing the peace?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Call whoever you want, Brenda. I'm not shutting it down. When the pipes burst in half the houses in this neighborhood because people listened to you, that's going to be on your conscience." Her eyes narrowed. "Fine. Consider yourself officially fined $1,000 effective immediately. You'll receive the invoice in the mail." She turned on her heel and marched back down my driveway, nearly slipping on a patch of ice before catching herself on my mailbox. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my neighbor, Robert Martinez, who lived 2 doors down. "Dude, did the HOA lady just fine you for running your generator? She woke up half the street banging on doors." I typed back quickly. "Yeah, she wants everyone to shut them down. Noise ordinance violation, apparently." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "That's insane. My pipes are already making weird noises. I don't have a generator. Can I run an extension cord to yours?" "Come over," I replied. "Bring whatever you need." Over the next hour, 5 of my neighbors showed up at my door. Mrs. Chen from next door brought her medication and the small cooler she had been using to keep it cold. Robert brought 2 space heaters. The Kowalski family from across the street showed up with their 2 kids, both under 5, wrapped in blankets and looking miserable. My generator was rated for 6,000 watts, enough to run quite a bit if we were smart about it. We set up a makeshift warming station in my living room. I had a gas fireplace that didn't need electricity to run, and combined with the space heaters rotating on and off, we managed to keep the temperature comfortable. The kids fell asleep on my couch while their parents, Tom and Lisa Kowalski, sat on the floor with cups of coffee I had made on my gas stove. "This is ridiculous," Tom said, shaking his head. "I've been part of HOAs before, but I've never seen someone actually enforce rules during an emergency." "Brenda takes her position very seriously," Mrs. Chen said diplomatically. She was 73 years old, a retired teacher who had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else. "But I have to admit, this seems excessive even for her." "It's not just excessive, it's dangerous," Lisa added. "Our pipes started making that creaking sound around midnight. If they freeze and burst, we're looking at thousands of dollars in damage." I had been thinking about that very issue. "Has anyone checked the community center?" I asked. Our subdivision had a small community center that was used for HOA meetings and neighborhood gatherings. It was at the center of the development, and if I remembered correctly, it had its own mechanical room. Robert sat up straighter. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that the community center has a boiler system for heat. If the power is out there too, and nobody is keeping that building warm, those pipes are going to freeze just like ours." "But the community center's pipes are connected to the main water distribution system for the whole subdivision. If those pipes burst, we're all in trouble." Tom's eyes widened. "Wait, you're saying that your generator might be doing more than just keeping our individual houses safe?" I nodded slowly as the pieces fell into place in my mind. When they built this subdivision 15 years ago, they designed it with a central water distribution system. The community center sits at the highest point in the development, and the water pressure is regulated through that building. If the pipes there freeze and burst, it could cause a pressure drop that affects every house in the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "Adam, are you certain about this?" "I helped my buddy install the plumbing when he did renovations on his house here 2 years ago," I said. He showed me the subdivision plans. "The whole system is interconnected. And I'm willing to bet that right now, the only thing keeping those pipes from freezing is the ambient heat that's radiating from our houses through the underground pipe system. My generator is keeping my pipes warm, which is keeping some heat in the ground, which is helping to protect the main system." "That's a lot of speculation," Robert said, but he didn't sound dismissive, just worried. "It is," I admitted. "But think about it. It's negative 15 degrees outside, and the power has been out for almost 19 hours now. The frost line in Minnesota is 42 inches deep, but that's under normal conditions. With cold this extreme and no heat anywhere in the system, those pipes are vulnerable." Lisa pulled out her phone. "I'm going to check the neighborhood Facebook group. Maybe someone knows more about this." While she scrolled, I went to my office and dug out the folder I kept with all my house documents. Buried in there was a copy of the subdivision plat map and the utility information that had been provided when I bought the house. I spread it out on my kitchen table, and everyone gathered around. "Look," I said, pointing to the diagram. "Here's the community center, and here are the water lines running to each section of houses. The system uses gravity feed from storage tanks that are housed in the community center's basement. If those tanks freeze, or if the pipes connected to them burst, the whole system fails." Tom whistled low. "And Brenda wants you to shut down the only generator in the neighborhood." "Not just once," I corrected. She fined me $1,000 for not shutting it down. Okay, Robert said, standing up. So what do? We can't just sit here and wait for disaster to strike. I checked my phone. It was almost 5 in the morning, and according to the power company's website, they were estimating another 12 to 18 hours before power would be restored to our area. An ice storm had knocked out power lines across 3 counties, and crews were working around the clock, but they had to prioritize hospitals and emergency services first. I'm going to the community center to check on it, I said. If the pipes there are in danger, we need to know. I'll come with you, Tom offered. Lisa, you and the kids stay here where it's warm. Mrs. Chen stood up with surprising energy. I'm coming too. I used to be on the HOA board before Brenda took over. I have a key to the building. That settled it. The 3 of us bundled up in our warmest clothes, grabbed flashlights, and headed out into the brutal cold. The walk to the community center was only about 300 yards, but it felt like miles. The wind had picked up, driving the temperature even lower, and my face felt like it was being stabbed with tiny needles. The community center was a modest single-story building with vinyl siding and a metal roof. In the summer, it looked cheerful and welcoming. Right now, it looked like an abandoned outpost on an alien planet. Mrs. Chen fumbled with the key, her hands shaking from the cold, and finally got the door open. Inside, it was barely warmer than outside. Our breath fogged in the beam of our flashlights as we made our way through the main room toward the mechanical room at the back. I could hear it before I saw it, a faint creaking and groaning sound that made my stomach drop. The mechanical room door was unlocked. I pushed it open and shined my light inside. The boiler sat silent and cold, and the pipes running along the ceiling and walls were covered in a thin layer of frost. But it was the main water line that caught my attention. It ran along the back wall, a 4-inch diameter pipe that fed into the pressure tank system, and it was already starting to bulge in one section. "Oh no," Mrs. Chen whispered. Tom moved closer, reaching out to touch the pipe, then jerked his hand back. "It's ice cold." "Adam, you were right. These pipes are going to burst." I did some quick mental calculations. If we're lucky, we have maybe 6 to 8 hours before that happens, maybe less if the temperature keeps dropping. "What can we do?" Tom asked. "We can't move your generator here, can we?" I shook my head. "It's not rated to run the boiler system, and even if it was, I'd have to shut down what we have going at my house. We'd be trading one problem for another." "Could we get heat in here somehow?" Mrs. Chen suggested. Even just enough to take the edge off, an idea started forming in my mind. "Tom, how much propane do you have for your grill?" "Full tank. Why?" "Robert mentioned he has a propane heater in his garage. If we could set up a couple of those in here, it might generate enough heat to keep these pipes from freezing until the power comes back on." Tom nodded eagerly. "I've got one too. Let me call Robert and have him bring them both here." While Tom made the call, I examined the pipes more carefully. The bulging section was the most concerning, but I could see stress fractures starting to form in the frost coating on several other sections. We were running out of time faster than I had thought. Mrs. Chen was looking at the pressure gauge on the boiler system. "The pressure is already starting to drop," she said. "Adam, if these pipes burst, what exactly happens?" "Best case scenario, we lose water pressure to the whole neighborhood and everyone's pipes freeze," I said. "Worst case, the pressure surge from the burst sends a shock wave through the system that causes failures at multiple houses. We could be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage across the entire subdivision." She went pale. "We need to call the HOA board. They need to know about this." "Brenda is the HOA board," I reminded her. "She and her 2 cronies, Linda and Susan." and I'm pretty sure after tonight I'm not her favorite person. I don't care, Mrs. Chen said firmly. She pulled out her phone and dialed. I could hear the phone ringing through the speaker, once, twice, 3 times, and then Brenda's annoyed voice. This better be important, it's 5:30 in the morning. Brenda, it's Margaret Chen. I'm at the community center with Adam Everett and Tom Kowalski. We have a serious problem. There was a pause. What are you doing at the community center? The pipes are freezing, Mrs. Chen said. The main water distribution pipes. If they burst, the entire subdivision will be affected. We need to get heat in this building immediately. Margaret, I'm sure you're overreacting, Brenda said, her tone condescending. The building is insulated. The pipes will be fine. Brenda, I'm looking at them right now. They're already bulging. We have hours at most. Then call a plumber, Brenda snapped. That's not an HOA emergency, that's a maintenance issue. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I grabbed Mrs. Chen's phone. Brenda, this is Adam. The plumber can't fix this. We need heat in this building to keep the pipes from freezing in the first place. And right now, the only heat source in this neighborhood is my generator, which you find me for running. Oh, it's you, Brenda said, her voice dripping with disdain. Of course you'd use this as an excuse to justify breaking the rules. Breaking the rules. I felt my temper rising. Brenda, are you listening? The entire subdivision's water system is about to fail. This isn't about rules, it's about preventing a disaster. The rules exist for a reason, Adam. If I let you run your noisy generator whenever you want, what's to stop everyone from doing whatever they please? The answer is no. Keep your generator off, or the fines will continue to increase. Tom grabbed the phone from me before I could say something I would regret. Mrs. Patterson, this is Tom Kowalski. I'm a civil engineer. What Adam is telling you is accurate. The physics of the situation are clear. These pipes will burst if we don't act now. I don't care if you're the President of the United States, Brenda said. The rules are the rules. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's early and I'd like to get back to sleep. We'll discuss this at the next board meeting. She hung up. The 3 of us stood there in the freezing mechanical room, staring at the phone in disbelief. Tom was the first to speak. She can't be serious. Oh, she's serious, I said. Brenda Patterson doesn't back down ever. I've seen her issue fines for grass being a 1/4 inch too long. Mrs. Chen took her phone back, her hands trembling. I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from anger. In 30 years of living in this neighborhood, I have never seen anything like this. This is negligence. This is criminal negligence. Maybe so, I said. But right now, we need to focus on solving the problem, not assigning blame. Tom, did you reach Robert? Yeah, he's getting the heaters. He'll be here in 10 minutes. We went back out to the main room of the community center to wait, trying to stay warm by moving around. Mrs. Chen was on her phone, texting furiously with someone. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. Mrs. Chen had posted a detailed explanation of the situation, complete with photos of the bulging pipes and a warning that the entire subdivision was at risk. The comments started rolling in immediately. Is this for real? Why isn't the HOA doing something? I just checked my pipes, and they're making weird noises too. Someone needs to call the city. That last comment gave me an idea. I pulled up the non-emergency number for the Duluth Public Works Department and dialed. It took a few tries to get through, but eventually I reached a tired-sounding woman who identified herself as Sarah. Public Works, how can I help you? I explained the situation as clearly and calmly as I could. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she sighed heavily. Okay, so you're telling me that you have a private subdivision with a private water distribution system, and the HOA is refusing to authorize emergency measures to prevent the pipes from freezing. That's exactly what I'm telling you, I confirmed. And you currently have a generator running that is providing some protection to the system, but the HOA has fined you for running it, correct? Another sigh. Sir, I appreciate you calling, but if it's a private system, it's not under our jurisdiction. The HOA is responsible for maintaining their own infrastructure. However, if the pipes do burst and it causes contamination issues or affects the public water supply, then we would need to get involved. Can I get your contact information in case we need to follow up? I gave her my details, feeling defeated. So basically, we have to wait for disaster to happen before anyone will help. I'm sorry, Sarah said, and she actually did sound sorry. I wish I could do more. My advice would be to document everything. Take photos, save emails and text messages. Anything that shows the HOA was warned about the situation and failed to act. If there is damage, that documentation will be important for insurance claims and potential legal action. Thanks, I muttered and hung up. Robert arrived a few minutes later, dragging 2 propane heaters on a dolly. Tom went to help him while I continued to document everything with my phone camera. I took photos of the bulging pipes, the frost buildup, the pressure gauges, and the silent boiler. I also started a video recording, narrating what we were seeing and what we were doing about it. Okay, Robert said as they hauled the heaters into the mechanical room. These aren't going to heat the whole building, but if we position them right, we might be able to keep the most critical pipes from freezing. We spent the next 20 minutes setting up the heaters, positioning them to aim at the sections of pipe that looked most vulnerable. The propane tanks would only last about 8 hours each, but that might be enough to get us through until the power came back on. As we were finishing up, Mrs. Chen called out from the main room. Adam, you need to see this. I walked out to find her standing by the front windows, looking out at the street. Dawn was starting to break, painting the sky a pale gray, and in that dim light, I could see people. Lots of people. At least 20 of our neighbors were walking toward the community center, bundled up against the cold. Word got out, Mrs. Chen said simply. We opened the door and let everyone in. Some had brought portable heaters, others had thermoses of hot coffee or blankets. One man, whose name I didn't know but whose face I recognized, had brought a portable generator similar to mine. I saw the Facebook post, he said, shaking my hand. Name's Victor. I live over on Maple Court, figured you could use backup. Victor, you're a lifesaver, I said. We can set up your generator to run the emergency lighting in here, and maybe a space heater or two to help keep the ambient temperature up. Everyone pitched in. Within an hour, we had transformed the community center into a functioning emergency warming station. Victor's generator was running the lights and a coffee maker that someone had brought. The propane heaters were keeping the mechanical room at a survivable temperature. People were checking on the pipes every 15 minutes and reporting back. It was around 8 in the morning when Brenda showed up. She stood in the doorway of the community center, taking in the scene with obvious displeasure. The buzz of conversation died down as people noticed her. What is going on here? She demanded. I stepped forward. We're preventing a disaster, Brenda. The pipes in the mechanical room were about to burst. We've set up heaters to keep them from freezing until the power comes back on. You had no authorization to access this building, she said. Margaret, I'm particularly disappointed in you. You know better than to give out keys to HOA property without board approval. Mrs. Chen drew herself up to her full 5'2" height. Brenda, I was on the board when we wrote the bylaws that you love to quote so much. Section 12. Paragraph 1 states that any board member or former board member may access HOA property in the event of an emergency. I used my judgment, and I stand by that decision. This isn't an emergency, it's mass hysteria, Brenda said. And you, she pointed at me, are still running your generator, which means you now owe the HOA $3,000 in accumulated fines. A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Victor stepped forward. Madam, I'm running a generator too. Are you going to fine me as well? If necessary, yes, Brenda said. Then fine me too, Tom spoke up. I would have been running one if I had one. And me, Robert added. One by one, people started volunteering to share in the fines. Brenda's face turned red, then purple. This is absurd, she sputtered. You're all breaking the rules, and there will be consequences. The only consequence we're concerned about is preventing pipe failure, I said. Brenda, I know you think we're overreacting, but I'm begging you to look at the evidence. Come to the mechanical room, see for yourself. I don't need to see anything, she said. I need all of you to clear out of this building immediately. The board will decide how to handle this situation at our emergency meeting this afternoon. This afternoon might be too late, I said. That's not your decision to make, Brenda snapped. She pulled out her phone. You have 10 minutes to vacate the premises or I'm calling the police for trespassing. The crowd erupted in protest, but I held up my hand for quiet. Everyone, it's okay, let's not make this worse. We've done what we can here. Let's go back to our houses and wait for the power to come back on. Adam, we can't just leave, Lisa protested. What about the pipes? The heaters will keep running for a few more hours, I said. And honestly, if Brenda wants to dig herself deeper into this hole, that's on her. We've documented everything. We've tried to help. We've done our due diligence. Reluctantly, people started filing out. Victor and I made sure the propane heaters were stable and had adequate fuel, and then we left too, pulling the door closed behind us. Walking back to my house, I felt a mix of frustration and dread. We had bought ourselves some time, but not much. And Brenda was clearly not going to budge. Back at my house, the group had expanded. More neighbors had come over, drawn by the warmth and the coffee and the sense of community that had developed. Lisa had made a run to my pantry and whipped up breakfast using my gas stove. Nothing fancy, just scrambled eggs and toast, but it felt like a feast. So what now? Robert asked as we ate. Now we wait, I said. The power company says they're still estimating power restoration sometime this afternoon or evening. If we're lucky, everything holds together until then. And if we're not lucky, Mrs. Chen asked. I didn't have a good answer for that. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Every hour, Tom or Victor or I would walk to the community center and check on the heaters and the pipes. The propane was holding out, and the pipes seemed stable for now. But the temperature outside had dropped even further, hitting negative 20 degrees around noon. At 1 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I answered. Is this Adam Everett? A man's voice asked, speaking. Mr. Everett, my name is James Crawford. I'm an attorney here in Duluth. Margaret Chen contacted me this morning about a situation with your HOA. I glanced over at Mrs. Chen, who was sitting in my living room pretending not to listen. She gave me a small smile. Yes, I said. Though I'm not sure what an attorney can do at this point. Mrs. Chen has explained the situation to me, and she's also forwarded me the documentation you've been collecting. Mr. Everett, I want to be clear about something. If the HOA's actions, or lack of action, result in significant property damage to the subdivision, the board members could potentially be held personally liable. Even if they were following the bylaws, I asked. The bylaws don't override common sense or basic duty of care, Crawford said. An HOA board has a fiduciary responsibility to the homeowners to maintain common property and infrastructure. Refusing to take reasonable action during an emergency could be considered a breach of that duty. I've already sent a formal letter to Brenda Patterson and the other board members putting them on notice. Will that actually change anything? I asked skeptically. Maybe, maybe not, Crawford admitted, but it creates a legal record, and Mr. Everett about those fines. I don't believe they would hold up if challenged. The circumstances clearly constitute an emergency, and reasonable people would agree that your actions were necessary to prevent greater harm. So you're saying I shouldn't pay them? I'm saying you should document your objection in writing and request a formal hearing before the board. In the meantime, don't shut off your generator. Keep doing what you're doing. After I hung up, I relayed the conversation to everyone. The mood in the room lifted slightly. At least someone with legal authority was taking us seriously. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the power flickered back on. The cheer that went up in my house was probably heard 3 blocks away. Lights blazed to life. The furnace kicked on with a reassuring hum, and I could hear similar sounds from the houses around us as electricity flowed back into the neighborhood. I immediately shut down my generator, my ears ringing in the sudden relative quiet. Robert pulled out his phone to check the power company's website. They're saying it should be stable now. The main lines are repaired. Thank God, Lisa said, holding her kids close. I never thought I'd be so happy to hear a furnace running. We gave it 30 minutes to make sure the power was really stable, and then Tom, Victor, Mrs. Chen, and I made one more trek to the community center. We needed to retrieve the propane heaters and make sure the building's systems were coming back online. When we opened the mechanical room door, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the boiler firing up. The automatic controls had kicked in as soon as power was restored, and the system was already starting to circulate hot water through the pipes. We did it, Tom said, grinning. We actually did it. I examined the pipes carefully, looking for any signs of damage. The bulging section I had noticed earlier was still there, but it didn't appear to have gotten worse. As the boiler ran and the pipes warmed up, I watched that section carefully. The frost started melting, running down the sides of the pipes in little rivulets. It's going to be okay, I said, feeling tension drain out of my shoulders. The pipes held. We collected the heaters and headed back outside. The sun had come out from behind the clouds, and even though the temperature was still bitterly cold, it felt warmer somehow. People were out on their porches, checking their mailboxes, just enjoying the fact that the crisis had passed. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal notice of fines totaling $5,000 for multiple violations of the noise ordinance, plus an additional $1,000 for unauthorized use of HOA property. There was also a notice of a lien being placed on my property until the fines were paid. I called James Crawford immediately. I was expecting this, he said when I read him the letter. Brenda is doubling down. She can't admit she was wrong, so she's trying to make you the villain. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to file a formal response challenging the fines and requesting an independent review. I'm also going to request a full inspection of the community center's water distribution system by a licensed engineer. If that inspection shows that the pipes were indeed in danger and that your actions prevented damage, it significantly strengthens our case. How much is this going to cost me? I asked. I wasn't wealthy, and the thought of legal fees on top of these bogus fines was stressing me out. Mrs. Chen has already spoken to several other homeowners, Crawford said. They're willing to contribute to a legal defense fund. They understand that this isn't just about you, It's about the precedent being set. If Brenda can fine you for protecting the neighborhood, she can fine anyone for anything." "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork and meetings. Crawford arranged for an independent engineer to inspect the community center. The engineer's report was damning. He confirmed that the pipes had been in imminent danger of freezing, and that the bulging section I had photographed showed clear signs of ice expansion. He estimated that if the pipes had burst, the repair costs would have been upward of $150,000, not including the damage to individual homes from the resulting pressure loss and potential flooding. Armed with this report, Crawford filed a motion to dismiss all fines against me and demanded that the HOA board be removed for gross negligence. He also filed complaints with the Minnesota Department of Commerce, which oversees HOA operations in the state. Brenda fought back hard. She hired her own attorney and sent letters to every homeowner in the subdivision, claiming that I was trying to undermine the HOA and that without strict enforcement of the rules, the neighborhood would descend into chaos. Some people believed her. I started getting dirty looks from a few neighbors who had always been Brenda supporters, but more people supported me. A petition started circulating calling for a special election to remove Brenda and the current board members. Within a week, it had signatures from over 70% of the homeowners. The special election was scheduled for a Saturday morning in early February. The community center was packed. Every folding chair was filled and people lined the walls. Brenda sat at the head table with Linda and Susan, her face set in a mask of righteous anger. The meeting was called to order, and Crawford stood up to speak on my behalf. He laid out the timeline of events, showed photos and videos, and presented the engineer's report. He spoke for 20 minutes, methodically dismantling Brenda's position. When he finished, Brenda stood up. "This is all very dramatic," she said. "But the fact remains that Mr. Everett broke clearly stated rules. If we allow residents to ignore the rules whenever they feel justified, we have no rules at all. I don't dispute that there was a potential problem with the pipes, but that doesn't excuse the violation. He should have contacted the board first." "You mean contact you?" Someone called out from the crowd. "At 3 in the morning during a power outage. The proper procedure is outlined in the bylaws," Brenda said stiffly. Mrs. Chen stood up. "Brenda, I was there. I saw those pipes. I heard you dismiss our concerns. You put your pride ahead of the safety of this neighborhood, and you're still doing it now." "That's your opinion, Margaret," Brenda said. "No, that's the opinion of a licensed engineer," Crawford interjected. "And it's the opinion of 70% of your neighbors who signed a petition calling for your removal. The vote wasn't even close. Brenda, Linda, and Susan were removed from the board by a margin of 82-6. A new interim board was elected, with Mrs. Chen serving as president. One of their first acts was to formally rescind all fines against me and to issue a written apology. But the story still wasn't over. 2 months later, in early April, I was working in my yard when a Duluth Police Department cruiser pulled up in front of my house. My heart sank. What now? The officer who got out was young, probably in his late 20s, with a friendly face. "Adam Everett?" he asked. "That's me," I said, setting down my rake. "I'm Officer Martinez. I need to ask you some questions about an incident that occurred in February involving the Meadowbrook Estates HOA." "Okay," I said cautiously. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sir. Quite the opposite, actually. We've been investigating some irregularities in the HOA's financial records, and your name came up in the investigation. That caught me off guard. Financial irregularities." Officer Martinez pulled out a notebook. "When the new board took over, they discovered that approximately $83,000 was missing from the HOA's reserve fund. The money was withdrawn over a period of 18 months through a series of checks signed by Brenda Patterson. When we questioned her about it, she claimed the money was used for maintenance and improvements to common areas, but she couldn't provide receipts or invoices to support that claim. I whistled. That's embezzlement. That's what we're investigating, yes. We're talking to homeowners to see if anyone noticed improvements or maintenance that would account for that amount of money. I thought about it. Now that you mention it, no. I've lived here 5 years, and the only work I've seen done on common areas was lawn mowing and snow removal, which are contracted services. Nothing that would cost $83,000. Officer Martinez made notes. That's consistent with what others have told us. Mr. Everett, I want you to know that your actions during the power outage actually triggered this investigation. When the State Department of Commerce started looking into the HOA's operations after the complaint your attorney filed, they noticed the missing money. So in a way, you helped uncover a much bigger problem. Happy to help, I guess, I said, still processing this information. One more thing, Officer Martinez said. During our investigation, we discovered that Mrs. Patterson had been issuing fines to multiple homeowners for questionable violations and pocketing the fine money instead of depositing it into the HOA account. Do you still have the documentation of the fines she issued to you? Every single piece of paper, I confirmed. We'll need copies of those for the case we're building. You're not the only victim, but you're the most thoroughly documented one. I invited Officer Martinez inside and made copies of everything: the violation notices, the certified letters, the fine invoices, my written objections, everything. He spent an hour at my kitchen table going through it all, making notes and asking questions. This is exactly what we need, he said as he packed up his materials. Mrs. Patterson is going to be charged with embezzlement and fraud. The amount involved qualifies as a felony. She's looking at serious prison time if convicted. After Officer Martinez left, I called Crawford to fill him in. He already knew the police had contacted him as well. This is bigger than I thought, Crawford said. Adam, you should feel good about this. You stood up for what was right, and it ended up exposing a criminal enterprise. Not many people have that kind of integrity. I just didn't want my pipes to freeze, I said, which made him laugh. The criminal case against Brenda took almost a year to work its way through the court system. During that time, the new HOA board worked hard to rebuild trust and repair the damage to the subdivision's finances. They passed new bylaws that limited the board's authority, required regular financial audits, and created an emergency procedures policy that specifically allowed homeowners to take reasonable action during disasters without fear of fines. Mrs. Chen turned out to be an excellent board president. She had a gift for bringing people together and focusing on practical solutions rather than petty enforcement of rules. Under her leadership, Meadowbrook Estates started to feel like a real community instead of a prison run by power-hungry bureaucrats. In March of the following year, Brenda Patterson pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her attorney made an argument for leniency, claiming that Brenda had been under financial stress due to medical bills and that she had intended to pay the money back. The judge wasn't sympathetic. You held a position of trust, Judge Morrison said at the sentencing hearing. You were elected by your neighbors to manage their resources and protect their interests. Instead, you stole from them. And when someone tried to prevent a disaster that would have cost the community hundreds of thousands of dollars, you punished him for it. Your actions show a pattern of putting your own interests above the welfare of others. This court finds that incarceration is appropriate. I attended the sentencing hearing, along with about 20 other homeowners from Meadowbrook Estates. When the sentence was announced, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt sad. Brenda had destroyed her own life through greed and stubbornness. After the hearing, Mrs. Chen and I stood outside the courthouse in the spring sunshine. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Relieved," I said. "And grateful that it's finally over." "You did a good thing, Adam," she said. "You should be proud." "I just ran a generator during a power outage," I said. She smiled. "You did much more than that, and you know it. You stood up when it would have been easier to back down. You documented everything when it would have been easier to just pay the fine and move on. You protected people who couldn't protect themselves. That's heroism, even if it doesn't look like what we see in movies." We walked to our cars together, and as I drove back to Meadowbrook Estates, I reflected on everything that had happened. It had started with a simple decision to keep my generator running during a power outage. That one decision had led to exposing fraud, removing a corrupt HOA board, and ultimately sending a criminal to prison. It had also brought the neighborhood together in a way I never would have expected. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Tom and Lisa out in their yard with their kids. They waved and I waved back. Victor was washing his car a few houses down. Robert was walking his dog. Normal, everyday suburban life. That evening, Mrs. Chen called to tell me that the HOA board had voted unanimously to name the community center's mechanical room after me. The Everett Emergency Response Center. I tried to talk her out of it, but she insisted. "Let it be a reminder," she said. "A reminder that sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. And a reminder that we're all responsible for taking care of each other, especially during emergencies." I gave in, but I made one condition. They had to add a plaque that listed everyone who had helped that night. Mrs. Chen, Tom, Robert, Victor, Lisa, and all the others who had brought heaters and coffee and blankets and their willingness to pitch in when it mattered. The plaque was installed a month later. It read, "In recognition of the residents of Meadowbrook Estates who took action during the winter storm of 2026 to protect our community infrastructure. Their quick thinking and cooperation prevented a disaster and exemplified the true meaning of neighborhood." Then, it listed all our names. I look at that plaque sometimes when I'm at the community center for meetings or neighborhood events. It reminds me that communities aren't built on rules and regulations. They're built on people who care enough to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. Even when someone in authority tells them they're wrong. Even when it costs them something. My generator sits in my garage now, maintained and ready in case we ever need it again. I hope we never do. But if another ice storm knocks out the power, if the temperature drops to -20, if pipes start freezing, I know exactly what I'll do. I'll fire up that generator without a second thought. And I'll do it knowing that this time, the whole neighborhood will have my back. Because that's what neighbors do. That's what communities do. They take care of each other, rules be damned. And if another Brenda Patterson ever shows up at 3 in the morning with a clipboard and a violation notice, well, I've got her number now. I've got documentation procedures in place. I've got an attorney on speed dial. And I've got a neighborhood full of people who understand that when the chips are down, doing the right thing is more important than following arbitrary rules. The generator incident, as everyone now calls it, changed Meadowbrook Estates for the better. The new bylaws protect homeowners while still maintaining reasonable standards. The financial audits ensure that HOA funds are being used appropriately. and the emergency procedures policy has already been put to use twice. Once during a severe thunderstorm that knocked out power for a few hours, and once during a water main break on the city side that required us to manage our private system carefully until repairs could be made. We've become the model HOA in Duluth, apparently. Mrs. Chen told me that she's been contacted by several other subdivisions asking for copies of our bylaws and procedures. She always sends them, along with a note explaining that the changes came about because one homeowner refused to back down when he knew he was right. I ran into Brenda's attorney once, several months after the sentencing. He was at the hardware store and we happened to be in the same aisle. He recognized me and came over. "Mr. Everett," he said, extending his hand. "I just wanted to say no hard feelings. I was doing my job representing my client." "I understand," I said, shaking his hand. "No hard feelings." "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think my client got what she deserved. What she did to you during that power outage was unconscionable, and the embezzlement, well, that speaks for itself. I'm glad your neighborhood has moved on to better leadership." It was a strange moment of connection with someone who had been, technically, my opponent. But it reinforced something I had learned through this whole experience. Most people are basically decent. Most people want to do the right thing. It's the Brendas of the world, the ones who let power go to their heads, who cause problems. As I write this, it's been almost 2 years since that freezing night when I first fired up my generator. Meadowbrook Estates is thriving. Property values have actually increased because word has gotten out that we're a well-managed, financially stable community. We've even added some nice touches, like better lighting along the walking paths and a playground at the community center, all paid for with HOA funds that are now being used appropriately. My relationship with my neighbors has deepened into real friendships. Tom and I play basketball on Sunday mornings. Mrs. Chen comes over for dinner once a month, bringing amazing homemade dumplings. Victor and I work on car projects together in his garage. Robert and I take our dogs on long walks through the subdivision, talking about everything and nothing. These friendships wouldn't have happened without the generator incident forcing us together. Crisis has a way of revealing who people really are, and it turns out my neighbors are pretty great people. Last winter, when the first real cold snap hit, I got a text from Tom. "Generator ready." I sent back a thumbs-up emoji, then Victor texted, "Got extra fuel if you need it." Mrs. Chen chimed in, "I made soup in case we need to hunker down." Robert added, "My place is open if anyone needs warmth." We didn't lose power that time, but the fact that everyone was ready, that everyone was thinking about the community, that everyone knew we would take care of each other, that meant everything. I learned something important through this experience. I learned that standing up for what's right isn't always dramatic or glamorous. Sometimes it's just refusing to turn off a generator when someone with a clipboard tells you to. Sometimes it's documenting everything carefully and thoroughly. Sometimes it's being willing to see a fight through to the end, even when it would be easier to give up. I also learned that you can't do it alone, without Mrs. Chen providing access to the community center, without Tom's engineering expertise, without Victor's backup generator, without Robert's support, without Crawford's legal knowledge, without all my neighbors who signed petitions and showed up to vote. None of this would have worked. Change requires community. And finally, I learned that systems, whether they are HOAs or governments or any other institution, are only as good as the people running them. Rules and regulations are tools, not gods. They serve a purpose, but that purpose is to help people live better lives together, not to give petty tyrants power over their neighbors. Brenda forgot that. She treated the HOA bylaws like they were holy scripture, and she treated herself like the high priestess interpreting them. She forgot that she was elected to serve the community, not to rule it. That's what brought her down in the end, not my generator or Crawford's legal maneuvers. She brought herself down through her own arrogance and criminality. I don't think about Brenda much anymore. I hope she's getting help in prison, and I hope when she gets out, she'll have learned something from this experience. But that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to my community, to my neighbors, to the people who depend on systems like water distribution and electrical generation working properly. Last month, the HOA board approached me about joining them. Mrs. Chen is stepping down next year. She wants to spend more time with her grandchildren in California, and they want someone to replace her who understands infrastructure and isn't afraid to make tough calls. I'm thinking about it. Part of me wants to say no, to avoid the headaches and the politics and the inevitable conflicts. But another part of me remembers that night in the mechanical room, looking at bulging pipes and knowing that action was required. Someone has to be willing to step up. Someone has to be willing to do the work of maintaining and protecting the community. Maybe that someone is me. I've got 6 months to decide before the next election. In the meantime, I'm learning everything I can about HOA management, reading books, talking to Mrs. Chen, attending every board meeting. If I'm going to do this, I want to do it right, and my generator is maintained and ready just in case. Because you never know when you'll need it. You never know when a winter storm will knock out power, or when a summer heat wave will stress the electrical grid, or when any of 100 other emergencies might occur. But I know this. If something happens, I'll be ready. My neighbors will be ready. We'll take care of each other, the way we always have since that night when everything changed, because that's what community means. That's what being a good neighbor means. It means showing up when it matters, even when it's inconvenient. It means standing up for what's right, even when someone with authority tells you you're wrong. It means documenting everything carefully so that truth has a fighting chance against lies. It means working together toward common goals, even when you don't agree on everything. And sometimes, it means running a generator at 3 in the morning while someone threatens to fine you, because you know that generator is the only thing standing between your neighborhood and disaster. I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Every time. That generator cost me $300 at Home Depot 5 years ago. It ended up saving the neighborhood hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential damage. It exposed a criminal. It brought a community together. It taught me lessons about courage and perseverance, and the importance of doing the right thing even when it's hard. Not a bad return on investment, all things considered. The generator hums away in my memory now, a constant reminder of that cold February night when everything changed. When I stood in my garage at 3 in the morning and made a choice. When my neighbors rallied together. When we discovered what we were capable of when we worked as one, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Not the stress, not the legal fees, not the sleepless nights worrying about whether Brenda would succeed in placing a lien on my house. All of it was worth it because of what came after. A stronger community, better leadership, real friendships, and the knowledge that when push comes to shove, we can count on each other. So yeah, my generator sits in my garage, maintained and ready. But it's more than just a machine now. It's a symbol, a reminder, a promise that we'll never again let someone like Brenda Patterson put rules ahead of people, power ahead of service, or personal pride ahead of community welfare. And if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, If you ever have an HOA board member standing on your doorstep at 3 in the morning telling you to stop doing something that you know is right and necessary, I hope you'll remember this story. I hope you'll stand your ground. I hope you'll document everything. I hope you'll rally your neighbors. And I hope you'll fight like hell to protect what matters. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Stand up for what's right, take care of each other, and keep the generators running when the power goes out, no matter who tells us to shut them down. That's my story. That's how an HOA fine turned into a criminal investigation, how a generator became a symbol of community resistance, and how a freezing February night changed everything in Meadowbrook Estates. And I'd do it all again tomorrow if I had to.